My name is Dino. I am 52 years old. I was a Jehovah's Witness, and I am soft shunned.
All right, Dino. So, how did you become one of Jehovah's Witnesses in the first place?
So I like to say often that I was born in, but I was not. I was raised in. I think I was 2 or 3 when mom got the knock on the door, the good old truth book, and one of the first families of Jehovah's Witnesses is who studied with um, from this area. First family of Jehovah's Witnesses from this area is who studied with my mom. Mom had a very colorful life. She had my dad is her was her third husband, and she had been married twice before. I have an older sister, 20 years older than me, and two brothers, 9 and 11 years older from her second husband. So mom says that she was praying, for guidance. She was looking for a religion, and they showed her the name Jehovah in the Bible, and things kind of progressed from there for mom. But I think she was looking for definitely for stability. She had lost at that time. I'm trying to remember. I think grandpa had already passed away. My grandma, her mom, was getting ready to pass away, and she had lost a sister very young. So I think the resurrection hope, of course, was big. Now this was just before 1975. This was like in the early 70s. But that being said, I don't remember a lot of discussion around the 1975 end of the world type fear that they had. So dad was very opposed to mom coming into being a witness. He was born and raised a Catholic, good Italian man, and he had a big family as well. Had a good job at a local place here called Electric Boat. They built submarines. So he had a very good career there, very good job, and but he had recently gone through a divorce himself before he married my mom, and I think he just couldn't deal with the idea of having another marriage end in divorce. So he kind of got on board with the witnesses and was baptized a few years after my mom left his job at Electric Boat and started his own business after that.
Wow, submarine building. That's not a career that you hear of many times. That's
Yeah,
unique.
it's huge in our area
Really.
in Southeast Connecticut. Yeah, they're one of the largest employers. They've built all the Los Angeles class, most of the Los Angeles class submarines from like Red October, the one that was chasing,
Oh yeah.
and um, and then a lot of the Trident submarines, the nuclear missile ones. But yeah, it's a huge industry in our area.
Oh, wow, that's unique. Um, and I think I'd be remiss if I didn't say, you could see that your mom was obviously vulnerable. She was in a vulnerable place when the witnesses came around. She had a lot going on, and
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
and that she was taught the name Jehovah or shown that name. That is the hook for a lot of people. Once
Hmm.
you're shown that, for a lot of people, they think, oh wow, now somebody's telling me the real truth. They're showing me, the things that other religions are hiding from me, or whatever the case may be. And so that's a strong hook to get somebody into the religion.
Oh, 100%. Yes.
Um, so let's talk about you a little bit. So then you weren't technically born in, but you were, mostly.
I was a little guy. It
Yeah,
must
yeah.
have been much harder for my brothers and my sisters because they were all, I mean, my sister would have been a teenager by that point when they were first introduced to it. And so we had instantly, we went from, when my mom and dad got married, they had a blended Brady Bunch family. There was 3 kids in already. My dad had 2 sons from his first marriage. They didn't live with us full time, but yeah, there was a lot going on. Our house was chaos all the time growing up, just from all the people moving in and out and activities that were going on.
Yeah, and that is an interesting point. If when you're a teenager and suddenly life changes in that way, it's really difficult uh, to assimilate into a whole new lifestyle, new family
Yeah.
dynamics, new everything. That's a lot. Um,
So, and before too long, So there's 20 years. My sister's 20 years older than me. So she was actually older than that. She was, um, yeah, she would have been over like 21, 22. So she got married, not long after, and then had a son and my nephew. And so then they all lived with us too. So like I said, I mean, I think there were 8 or 9 of us in this house at one point, all living together. And it was just like, I just remember just activity and craziness all the time, getting ready to go to meetings, and we like all loading into this giant station wagon and bebopping into town. It was just, uh,
Station wagon. Did you have the seat in the back that looked out the back?
me and my nephew side by each, because he's only 3 years younger than me. And yeah, so we were side by side in the back. It's a movie called the Way Back that yeah, the people were the young people in that movie were forced to sit way in the back of the car, looking backwards, getting car sick all the time
Yeah, getting car sick, choking down exhaust fumes out the back of the car. That was my
because the
life
windows
too
open.
as a kid, going out in
Yeah.
service and stuff. So I get it. Uh, so how did so you were kind of raised as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, basically. What
Yeah.
was the worldview that it gave you as a kid growing up?
So I live in the quintessential small town USA. We have way more cows and chickens in this town than we do people. And so I think my graduating class from junior high was less than 30 people. And even when my daughters graduated from there a few years ago, same thing. It was like if you had 35 people in the graduating class, that's a big class. So and we live on a little cowpath road in the middle of the boonies. And mom understood it was important for me to have friends and to have a social life. Um, there were a few people in the Kingdom Hall, but they didn't live near us. So I was never, there never were like any real play dates or anything like that. So of course, I was scared a little bit about all of the Armageddon, the end of the world. And mom, my mom is a very interesting person, and she's very good at, or was very good at, being able to rationalize things. And so she would tell me, I had my best friend Ted lived down the street from us, and I was at his house all the time. And I remember telling her one day, Mom, I don't want Ted to die at Armageddon. I can't believe this is going to happen. Like, I'm very sad about this. And mom was like, no, no, no. And I was scared about myself. I'm like, how am I going to make it through, and all that? She's like, don't worry about it. Jehovah's going to protect you. It's going to be, force field over you or whatever. Nothing's going to happen to you. She goes, as far as Ted goes, like Jehovah reads hearts. Ted's going to be fine. He's innocent, and he'll make it through, and he'll be your brother. He'll live with you in the new system. Now, of course, I'm like, oh, that's going to be awesome. I'm not even thinking about, Ted's parents are going to be dead. But that's how mom would rationalize it to me, and it made sense to me. And so I didn't have the gloom and doom idea of Armageddon, not until my teenage years. So all during my grow up years, I was fine. I was more fearful of elders in the congregation than I was of anybody else. I remember one of my earliest memories. Why I remember this, I don't know. But me and my buddy were looking in the contribution box at the Kingdom Hall, like the little slot, and we're looking into it, and we're trying to see what's in it. And this guy comes over, grabs both of us by the back of the shirts, screaming and yelling at us, drags us down to the basement. I mean, just screaming, "You're trying to steal money out of the contribution box. I saw what you were doing." And we're like, we're just looking. We're little kids. We're just curious as to what was in that black void. And my dad didn't like that guy. He had words with him. He's like, don't you ever, and my mom too. They were like, don't you ever take my son out of their view ever again. My dad never liked that guy. But yeah, that was my immediate, like, oh, the elders are like always watching and they're quick to judge.
Yeah, I'm sure there was some respect or at least fear of them after an incident like that. So
Oh,
you
it
may
was
not have been
terrible.
afraid of Armageddon, but afraid of them.
Oh, for sure, for sure. Fortunately, he didn't stay in our congregation very long. He actually ended up a circuit overseer later on, but
Of
of
course he did.
course he did.
Of course he ended
But
up a circuit overseer.
but that being said, his two sons never. Well, one was kind of in and out of the truth, and the other one I'm still friends with today, and never became a witness. I still see him
Interesting.
from time to time. Yeah. Anyway.
Interesting. Um, so you mentioned you were talking about your grow up years, I believe you said, at this point. So what was it like? What was your house like? I mean, you mentioned it being chaotic, but were you all a family that was deep into you know, you were always at every meeting, like just automatically. You were always out in the service. You were always doing, your family study, all that kind. What kind of an environment did you grow up in?
Oh,
Was
so
it fun? Did you all go out and do, recreational things? What were the good times you had?
yeah. So where to start with this? Um, my sister divorced her first husband. They ended up getting, and she ended up marrying my half brother from my dad's first marriage. So they got together and they started their own family and they went off and did their thing. And then eventually everybody else moved out of the house except for me. So then I went from a chaotic household of 8 or 9 people to just the three of us within the course of just a couple years. So by the time I was 10, I was an only child. So that was awesome. Once I got to be only child status, life was awesome. Yes, we were at definitely all the meetings, all the conventions, um, field service every weekend. Um, Watchtower was expected to be studied, but we never did it as a family. But you were expected to have it done. And we always, our congregation at that time was always doing something. So it was, we had this place called Fort Shantok that was a state park. We always had picnics down there, probably once a month during the summer months. And many times other congregations would come into, and we just have these, huge potluck picnics, and play baseball and everything else that you can imagine at these events. After why they thought this was a good idea, but after our theocratic school and service meeting nights, um, until we built the new Kingdom Hall, they always thought it was a great idea that everyone goes to like a pizza place afterwards. So not only are you getting out of the meeting at like 9:30, now it's like, hey, let's keep the 10-year-old up until midnight drinking beer and eating pizza. But it was what it was. And I mean, I know from the adult standpoint, they just wanted to hang out and have fun. But again, those are good memories of mine. I enjoyed that, and I got to know the other people and the other young ones in the congregation. And we had a lot of young ones in our congregation,
Sounds
but
like
very few. Oh,
I
go
was
ahead.
saying, you sounds like you all had a really good social, like it was community for you. A
Yeah,
lot of people
100%.
love that, they join cults or religions for, certainty, purpose, and community. And you've got the community aspect right there where you all are. I've never heard, I don't think locally, I'm not sure I've ever heard of a congregation that got together that often. We might have one time a year gotten together for something, but there was definitely no like every month thing or whatever. I mean, it
Yeah,
sounds like you all had a good community around.
we did, and that lasted for a good long time, almost into the well into the 80s, with that type of congregation. People about our congregation, people said all the time, like when they would come visit, like they could just, and you could, and this is no lie. I mean, you could feel the love in the congregation. People really cared about each other, and they took care of each other. It was very much communal, and it had, that part of it had a huge impact, on me as I grew up and got older. And then certain things changed too in that time period, but my dad also at this point had like cut himself off from his family, and he loved his brothers and sisters, but we didn't see them hardly ever. Once in a while, and like I knew I had cousins, but I didn't know them. Um, Funerals and weddings, but only at the reception and only at the funeral home, we never went into the church at all. Dad just like that was a no go for him, and that caused tension. Our relatives didn't understand why he wouldn't go into the church. And looking back at it now, it's just like, oh God, like we suck because I had my dad passed in 2016. A year to the date, a really good friend of ours lost their son. And I'm not very well, people don't know this yet, but I'm not very religious now at all. But that didn't matter. I went to the church service for them because it was comforting for them. It was, they're my friends. I love them. And I imagine it must have tore my dad up. I never talked to him about that, so those are the things like I always had trouble reconciling, even young.
Yeah. On one side, you've got this loving community, but on the other hand, you're kind of pushing some other people away and separating yourselves from them. That's got to be difficult
Yeah.
to wrap
Yeah.
your mind around. So sounds like the Kingdom Hall. How about for you? What was it like just for you? Did you enjoy going out in field service and doing the witness activities? Obviously the community meant a lot to you, but were you also really into giving talks and commenting and doing things at the Kingdom Hall and all that when you were growing up?
Yeah, I liked it. I remember my first Bible reading. It was supposed to be in the second school, and whatever happened, that person had canceled, and so then I got thrusted up on the main stage, and so I got up there. I don't know how old I was, probably that same timeline, 10-ish. I was old enough where I didn't need a box to stand on. The microphone and the podium were able to go down low enough. And that continued. Yeah, I like doing that part. Field service, I mean, like you had Patrick. I listened to Patrick's yesterday. He's like, he loved field service. I'm like, I don't know if I ever loved field service, but I thought it was an obligation, a commitment. So I did it when I was younger. I didn't have a choice. You were just kind of dragged along. But it's hard to say no to a cute 10-year-old with a watchtower and a wake on that. So I didn't mind it. Commenting was never a problem. Like the information was, for the most part, easy enough to understand, even for, a 10-12-year-old. So I had no problem commenting, things of that
Uh,
nature.
so we've kind of talked about the family life a little bit, the Kingdom Hall life. Uh, did you go to public school? How was school for you growing up? Did you find community there, or were you able to assimilate or not?
I did. So yeah, public school, very small school. First grade, I didn't go to kindergarten. So mom put me in first grade, and I was chosen to be one of the class marshals that year to lead the eighth graders down because I was such a good little example of what a nice young man was supposed to be. Um, Second grade was 1976, bicentennial year. I'm not even paying attention. Apparently, we had our pictures taken in front of a American flag. I didn't even pay attention to it. Oh, I got uh, my dad was livid. My mom was okay with it. She was like, "Hey, accidents happen, no big deal." My dad was like, "How did you not notice it? You know we're So that was ruined. And then that same year, I had this real jerk of I guess he wasn't a friend. So we're not doing Valentine's cards, but we're supposed to write Valentine's cards for everybody. And of course, I say no, I can't do it. So my friend Mark, was his name. He says, "Hey, I can write one for you." And I'm like, no, you really don't have to. Long story short, he wrote one. It was the most profane, just uh, obscene card. And I remember the girl he gave it to because her and I are still friends to this day. We laugh about it. And again, I'm like, "Dad, I didn't write this thing." And our parents were very much into they liked the corporal punishment, not abusive levels, but mom was always like, "Right, so this is going to be three hits with the ruler." And mom was, 1, 2, 3 hits with this wooden ruler, and it hurt like heck. But, so yeah, I got my butt whooped for that one even. So second grade was a tough year for me between the bicentennial and Valentine's Day card scandal that I had really nothing to do with, but still got in trouble for.
I you saying that about the flag, um, that's it's just one of those things you're not going to notice as a kid, right? There was an elder in our congregation growing up that apparently when he was a little kid, he was featured in a newspaper as a little kid holding the flag that everybody else was saluting in some sort of little parade thing or something, because he knew he wasn't supposed to salute the flag or anything, but he had never been told he couldn't hold it. And the teacher had him holding it, and it was pictures were taken. It was all in the newspaper. It was this big thing. And I just remember feeling so bad for him, hearing that story. But also, it's just funny because kids don't know the nuances of all this, right?
No, no.
And you don't know you're supposed to. I mean, what kid is so appearance focused that they're literally going to, take the temperature of the room, look around, see what's around them? No,
Oh, and they're moving you through there like cattle. Like, all right, next smile, click, next smile, click. You got to go through a couple hundred kids. That reminds me of it was a Black Friday here, and a bunch of witnesses went shopping, and they had their picture taken. It was put in the newspaper, and it's like, people getting an early start on their Christmas shopping on Black Friday, and it was this photo of like 5 witnesses walking through a mall.
that's awesome.
It was awesome. Yeah, pretty funny.
That's
Um,
funny.
but yeah, I mean, never partook in the Christmas pageants or singing. I was excused out for music class when they were doing their holiday songs and whatnot. In art class, I would just draw, a winter scene instead of a Christmas scene or anything like that. One thing I do remember doing is I would go to the library like most of us would do and read, and it must have been like sixth, seventh, eighth grade, but I started reading books on like World War II, Iwo Jima, things like that. So there I am, out of the Christmas song singing, but reading all about war and destruction. And so like, oh, there's a nice little dichotomy for you.
No,
But
no happy winter Christmas scenes for Dino. He's
no,
reading
not
about
not
war.
not in Iwo Jima.
So did you make, because you've mentioned a
Oh,
few times now that you've kind of, I guess you still have some of these people as friends. So did you find community there? I mean, were you, was school in any way an escape for you, or was it just kind of a continuation of this community that you were developing?
yeah, school was just, I would say from up until eighth grade, because we had a K through 8 school. School was just probably, aside from not being part of the Christmas songs and art class and whatnot, and not doing. I don't even remember us really doing birthday celebrations in class. I don't have to worry about being eating the cupcake or not. It was probably like any regular person's viewpoint of or experience in school up through eighth grade. Just Anytown, USA. Dino's just in the class. He's the one, just he stands for the Pledge of Allegiance, but doesn't put his hand over, doesn't recite it, doesn't put his hand over his heart, type of thing. Um, I remember in eighth grade graduation though. I didn't have a chance to. We always did this thing, and I don't know. Other people may not have done it this way, but my mom always told me, like, if you're already standing when the national anthem starts, you can remain standing. So anytime, like, or before a sporting event would get ready to start, like, I was always standing up ahead of time, so that way I couldn't do that for my eighth grade graduation, and I had to sit there during the playing of the national anthem, and I just felt like, and maybe they weren't, but I just felt everybody in that audience was burning their eyes through me at that point. But
Oh yeah, it's one of the more uncomfortable feelings that you'll ever feel. So
yeah,
I've been in crowds of 50,000 football fans sitting there and just feeling all eyes on me,
all the
and
hatred,
nobody tries to start a fight or
right?
whatever the case may be. It's just brutal, absolutely brutal.
And then yeah, and the kids in school, I mean, we all got along. Again, it was small town USA. We pretty much all got along fine, and we had in my area, my street, we had a friend. We became a friend, but he was an older gentleman. Mom was always worried about him if something weird was going on, but nothing to my knowledge, nothing ever happened with the gentleman. He was just a nice old guy. And he had like 150 acres of land. He always had candy, soda, a barn to play basketball in the wintertime, a huge field to play football in, motorcycles. And every day after school, like we all went down the street to this guy's house and all hung out. And there was probably 10 of us at any given point. Not all of us showed up every day, but and we would go down to this guy's house and hang out, or we were playing football or baseball in my backyard, or going to all the time at my friend Ted's house. He, when I hear stories of people like, oh yeah, after the holidays, after Christmas, like, oh, the kids would have all their new stuff, and I always felt like a little left out. Not me, man. I went to Ted's house. I got to play with all of his stuff that he had just gotten, and so I lived all my Christmas and holiday dreams vicariously through Ted. And he's still a good friend of mine to this day. He lives down in Florida, and anytime we go down to Disney, we usually hook up and see each other.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And cool for Ted. He was obviously happy to share, and
oh yeah, great family.
You experience that as well. Kids can be genuinely really nice about that stuff.
Yep. Yep.
So how did life change? You mentioned at 10 years old, you're giving your first talk or whatever the case may be. So how did life start to change as you went into your teenage years? I know you also were no longer now you were the only child, so to speak. So how did things progress as you went into your teenage years?
Well, so we also had, my dad loved camping. So we would go to a campground, and so that was kind of like, that was double life Dino, if you will. So at the campground, I acted like somebody who was not a witness for the most part. I had a bunch of, young, puppy love girlfriends there, and hanging out with all the guys actually all the young people at the campground, going up into our early teenage years. And then when camping season was over, it would move back home, and I was a good little witness again. And it's all very, very innocent stuff. It's just, but I hated it when witnesses would come to the campground to camp, because then I had was like ducking and dodging and couldn't be seen and all that type of stuff. And during this time period, my aunt, my mom's sister, she lived in New Hampshire, and she was working with physically and mentally abused, maybe even sexually abused women. And she saw like this high rate of witnesses, women who were wives that were witnesses in this. And my mom just like, no, that's not true. It can't be happening. They're like, all you gotta do is tell the elders. But I remember that to this day. And my aunt was like, no, Doris, I'm telling you, like, this is for real. Like, this is really happening. And now, of course, in retrospect, you look back and you're like, oh, I'm sure, I guarantee it was happening, and it was a problem. So like, that was another thing that kind of like was, tucked way back in the back of my head, back during that time. But teenage years, finally, 16 years old, I kind of outgrew the camping thing, and the kids at the campground, we kind of had finally dispersed. So, it was a great run from like 12 to 16. And then it was like, all right, it's time to get real about this. And 17, I was baptized, but went through high school and hated high school. I went to a technical high school. I didn't fit in at all there. I was a dork. There's just no other way to put it. Terrible haircut, terrible sense of, I still have a terrible sense of fashion according to my daughters. And the other witness kids, for the most part, except for maybe one, maybe two, they were worse to the good witnesses, if you will, the ones that were trying to do the right thing, than the worldly kids were. Like, they were abusive. They were just doing their own thing, and they weren't acting like, good little Jehovah's Witnesses. So we really stuck out, because it's like, well, how come you don't act like, or how come this guy doesn't act like you do, and this, that, and the other thing. So it was very confusing for the other kids in school. It was confusing for me. I didn't understand any of this. Couldn't wait to get out of high school. But yeah, so that was kind of the transition. But congregationally wise, at that point, we were I was doing well. I had microphone privileges, going to quick builds all the time. Dad was huge into the quick build scene. So every once a month we were off to somewhere in New England building a Kingdom Hall. Remember one of my weird memories is I remember leaving. We had a new Polaroid camera. I left it at a quick build, and a month later, we got it back at the next quick build. All the film was out of it, so somebody had taken pictures with it. And my mom was like, "See, that shows you Jehovah's people are the most honest because we got back like our $200 Polaroid or whatever. Like nobody stole it." I was like, "Oh, okay, mom. I'm just glad we got it back, and you're not yelling at me anymore."
So what did you all do? You said that you all went on these quick builds all the time. A lot of families maybe specialize in something. Did you all have a specialty that you all
Well,
were kind of involved in?
I think it depends on what part of my um, career in quick builds that we were at. Basically, when quick builds first started, it was basically a marathon session, and you started with the framing of the Kingdom Hall, and you just went until you dropped, and didn't matter what stage of the construction that you were in. Later on, it became more specialized into different groups. So, I mean, I had worked on the drywall crew, I'd worked on the roofing crew, the framing crew, sometimes with trim. Most of the time, we were just like in a support role because I was still pretty young then, 16 to 18 years old. So we weren't like really in a lead position anywhere. We were just kind of doing whatever we were asked to do. My dad eventually morphed into what they called the quick response team. He's got there's a hard hat around here somewhere that says QRT on it. And everyone always joked there's nothing quick and nothing responsive about these people, but they're the QRT. My dad would go up the week before and set up all the tents, the food trailers, that type of thing. And then anything that came up that was needed to be done quickly to keep the hall moving forward is what the quick response team was. So they would, I don't even know, but like if somebody needed to run to a hardware store, like off they went, or something broke in the food trailer, they would fix it, or the portalets needed extra canopies over them. I don't know, whatever. Like they would handle all the support stuff in support of the actual building of the hall.
I didn't know that that's what it was called, but I've only ever I'd worked on we had a Kingdom Hall built, and I'd worked on grading the land and doing all the grunt work that had to be done to prep things for a quick build. But the only quick build I ever actually went to, I guess I was kind of on the quick response team because they had me, I knew the area. And so I was going to hardware stores and just picking up the things that they needed to get something done. And I actually kind of enjoyed it. It was fun.
One quick build, we were, I was actually on the material management crew. It was a local Kingdom Hall that was being built. And so that was huge because you couldn't just let anything go out the door to anybody. Like it had to be for that phase of the work that was being done. And like I got to understand like the organizational side of things that kind of went on behind. The brother that was in charge of that actually works for a commercial construction company now and is a very, very smart individual. And I learned a lot construction wise from a material management and a project management side of things, just from him on that experience and all the meetings that led up to that quick build. Working with him was awesome. It was very, very educational.
So what led, you mentioned getting baptized at 17. And I know you were kind of like, well, it's time to take this seriously, after your camping years were dwindling. So what was it that made you take it seriously, or what was it that made you get baptized? What made you take that particular step?
That step. So during this time period, so again, my dad was not like the family study guy. So mom talked to a brother in the congregation, and had him start to study with me. And I think we did. I believe it was a knowledge book. So anyway, we went through the knowledge book, and I was hanging out with my other witness friends, and I think only one of them had been baptized by that point. That was like still my age, and then there was like a group that was like 3 or 4 years older than us that had been baptized, and they were pioneering now and doing their. They were very serious about it, and it was just going through the knowledge book, and it's all right. This is what's one. It was what was expected, but also like, I mean, I'll bet I was into it. Like I liked it. I liked being different. I guess being different or thinking that I was unique, one of the few that would live in this paradise. So yeah, and I just wanted to do what was necessary to ensure me hopefully being counted as worthy, and also in the congregation, like to be used more and to like be on these quick build, to have a higher level of responsibility on the quick build team and in the congregation. During that time period, we were always doing something. And I liked it. I liked the busyness of it. It wasn't that we were super. We were spiritual, I guess, to a certain extent, but like my dad was always working. Like if there was a convention or an assembly, like dad was working. We were involved in the dramas. Dad was always involved in like the set building, and we were we were drama roadies. We were the guys that like went up on the stage and moved all the props around, and we'd have to go to like 3 conventions in a row until like, hey, we're with the band or we're with the drama. They had to like let us in. Like we'd show up just before the drama, do our thing, grab the props from backstage, and it was kind of fun, and you felt like you had a sense of purpose. And so yeah, I just wanted to like, all right, now it's time to get serious. I'm almost an adult now, and this is something I need to do.
So I love that you said drama roadies.
Oh, dude, I've been waiting for that line. I love that line. My daughters crack up when I say it.
So being drama roadies, did you have to actually stay and partake of the entire convention each time? Like I know, like sometimes when you had a part on a convention, this happened to me. You were expected to show up for multiple conventions, and I I don't know. That was just a lot to do, at least in my opinion. I didn't like having to be there for all 3 days of like all these
No,
conventions.
no,
It was
no.
repetitive and boring to me.
Sure.
Did you enjoy
Yeah.
that though?
Well, we
Or
enjoyed
did you
the
have to be there for all of it? Is what I was trying to
we
ask.
enjoyed the drama portion of it. No, we would. So if the drama went on at 10 o'clock in the morning or 10:30, whatever, we showed up half an hour beforehand, did our thing, did the drama, put everything back where it needed to be, and we skated after that. So, and then after the third convention, we would just, as soon as the drama was over, everything came off the stage. We'd have to sit there until lunchtime, until the break, or if it was an afternoon drama, until the end of the session. And then we load up all our props and bail. So no, we did not sit through 3 separate conventions for 3 days for this. But they were always local enough where we could drive to them that day.
Gotcha. And I can see
So,
that being fun. Again, you felt like you were doing something that mattered for the group of people that you were
yeah.
around. And
So the one of the other kind of crazy things that happened in my life. So again, hated high school. I'm now baptized, and I can't remember if it was the night before or the week before, but there was a crew that was doing what they considered overnight security at the convention, and they were playing football inside the auditorium, and somebody broke his foot, broke a toe. I don't know. There was a thing that happened. So like they had to call in a B crew to like, these people were dismissed. So and it landed on the night of my high school graduation if I wanted to be part of this team. And I was like, I am so there. I could care less about this high school graduation. So I skipped my high school graduation to hang out in an arena with like 3 other young teenage Jehovah's Witnesses, stay up all night long doing this security thing, Received my diploma in the parking lot of the Kingdom Hall by my wife's best friend who worked at the school that I graduated from like a month later. The night that this happened, there was a murder behind the convention in this little alcove. So right behind the arena, there was a murder. Cops beating on the door, like, did we see anything? What's going on? Did you hear anything? Is there anyone else in here? Meanwhile, out front, there's a Stevie Nicks concert being put on sale the next morning. There's just randos walking through the convention because they could come in to use the back restroom, and then they would just start walking through the place. So, like, it was the most hectic, kind of scary night, one of the scariest nights of my life while all this stuff was going on. And, like, the next 2 days, we were just completely shocked because we had been up for, like, 3 days in a row while all this craziness was going on.
Wow.
But looking back, it's hysterical. It's like, this is a great story. I love it.
Yeah, that's wild. I did the security one time. All we found was a bat. There was a bat flying around. I think it hit a light or something and came down. And so we got it, put it in a bag of some sort, took it outside, released it. It was fine. But like, that's all we got. We didn't have murders and concerts at all.
Oh, it was craziness.
That's crazy.
It was a lot of, it was crazy. Yeah, for sure.
Wow.
And then you had talked in one other episode, I was dying laughing, so I brought up this memory for me. So that after you're baptized, like the next Thursday night meeting, they actually ask you to close with prayer, right? I remember this to this day. Hurricane Gloria, so it's 1985. Hurricane Gloria is coming up from the south, and in my prayer, I'm like, please shelter us from the devastating effects of like Hurricane Gloria that may be coming up the eastern seaboard. In my prayer.
It is so awkward to have to give that first prayer. It is so tough to figure out what you're going to say. The nerves are high. Everybody's listening.
Yep.
And you haven't developed your rote prayer to say yet for all the meetings.
Correct.
But you learn.
You learn.
So, all right. So you get baptized.
Yep.
You're 17. 18 is usually the time some decisions have to be made as far as what you're going to do. Are you going to go to college? Or are you going to pioneer? What are you going to do? So what was your trajectory?
So I graduated high school and went to work for my dad, who was he's in construction, mostly remodeling. And one of my best friends came to work with me at that time. And that was kind of it. I had a few friends that had gone to Bethel, and the idea of institutionalized living just like didn't sit well with me. I didn't think that was something I would enjoy. And then in talking to a few of them that had gone, and they had very much trade school background in whether it was construction, automobile, electrical, whatever. And they're in the dining room or they're in the press room and they're not being used for what their talents are. And they're like, oh, it's part of being humble and doing what, Jehovah's going to use you where he needs you, this and that. I'm like, well, that's great. I don't want to be a press. I don't want to be a press guy. And I don't want to work in the dining room. So that kind of put Bethel out of my mind as far as a life goal. And at that same time, so back when I was little, there was this girl in our congregation who had since moved to California. So part of my graduation was, and we had always been running around like holding hands and kissing each other on the cheek, and everyone's like, oh, you two are going to get married someday. So, and she's very attractive and stayed in touch with her, throughout this time period, and flew out to California. And my best friend went with me. It was my graduation present to, I guess, for my parents or for myself, either way. And I'm all excited, like, I got to meet this girl, and maybe like we can rekindle something. Who knows what will happen? I get off the airplane. She meets me at the gate and introduces me to her fiance. And I'm like, this is like some bad John Hughes movie going on here. So I came back home. You know, we had a good time over there, but came back home and I kind of bummed out and depressed and over that because I'm like, don't want to rest in it here anymore. And then started dating my wife after that. She had recently broken up with a guy that she was dating in the congregation, and so then we started kind of dating, you know, and so once that was gonna, I realized that was gonna be serious, and we were probably going to get married. Then it was the idea of that, I don't know, pioneering and all that. Like I was just working with dad, and never really got any. I'll be honest, never really pursued anything more than that spiritually, as far as reaching out for privileges. I figured I could be a good publisher. Maybe I'll be a servant and I can still help out with the quick builds and help out with our local Kingdom Hall. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's perfectly fine. So,
Yeah, absolutely, and that's doing quite a bit in and of itself. To be able, if you had been doing those things along with trying to have a family and everything. You mentioned your
sure.
wife, so was she was in the same congregation as you?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. My wife and I have known each other since we were like 6 years old.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
wow. Um, and so then you got married. Uh,
Well, so at the same time, so this is like hugely important as far as what happens to me from uh, this point in my life going forward. Before I got married, we had like a rearrangement of the congregations, and as I mentioned, we had like a lot of younger people that were our age in the congregation, um, and then they all kind of moved on to other things. And then the elder body got completely rearranged with this idea of you should be attending the congregation whose territory you live in. So we had some new additions to the elder body that personality wise clashed very, very harsh with mine. And there was one particular brother who became our presiding overseer who him and I just never saw eye to eye. And we had some issues. And again, it was all very innocent stuff that happened that all got blown way out of proportion. I'm being called, you know, comes to my house at the time, which is still the house I live in now because we bought it from my parents. But I'm being called a ringleader, and the police were called in a situation at a miniature golf course, which wasn't what happened. The security guard was there anyway. He just came over to chat with us, make sure everything was cool, and we ended up having a nice conversation with him. And it just, my mom to the day that she passed away said, I just wish he had never come over and met with you that night, because she really believes that's like the moment where I threw the truth away, which
so
isn't necessarily true, but
okay,
it certainly
yeah,
had an effect.
people always, particularly Jehovah's Witnesses, try to find this one moment that they think was the reason that you're out or whatever the case may be. Um, so what is that moment that so he comes over and talks to you, and that's it? I mean, you know, what happened? I guess that was so big she thinks that's why you threw it away.
Oh, I mean, it was like, so he came over with another brother, and he's outlining like this whole line of events that is, he looks like Columbo. He's got a pad he's flipping through with all these notes on it. And the other brother that was with him, I'd known him since I was a little kid, and I got along great with that brother. And I still see that guy from time to time, and we'll still chit chat. Um, but this other guy, he was just like, he was out. I don't know why. He was like outgunning for me. Like he expected me to confess something, and I don't know if he expected it to go to the next level and maybe a judicial committee or what. But like he made some serious accusations against my personality and against my integrity, and said I was lying to him about what happened that night. And I basically told him to, you can get the bleep out and of my house, because I'm not talking to you anymore about this. And the other brother pulled me aside. He's like, "Oh, we don't need to be like this and that. If you have an issue with something, just say the word." I'm like, "I think I just said the word. Like, he needs to leave." So that, I mean, that was it. But it really, Like he really got under my skin, and he did he pissed me off. I mean, there's just no other way around it because that wasn't who I was, and the situation was blown completely out of proportion, and there was nothing bad that happened. It was it was an innocent night of kids playing miniature golf, and that was it.
Well, we do know that the worst things, the biggest crimes and sins are perpetrated at the mini golf course.
I mean, if we had gone on the the go karts, I could understand there would have been some shenanigans going on, but this was mini golf.
So mini golf happens, something happens, there's a security guard, and then he just assumes. It sounds like he just blew. That got back to him, and he assumed something happened.
Yeah, complete. And even and again, it was like, well, who else was there and this and that? And I was like, you can, like, you have your little notepad, look it up. You know who was there. Like, I don't have to tell you this stuff. So, like, I also was not very cooperative with him either. But at the same time, I'm like, this is BS. Like, I just want to be a young adult. And like, yeah, I said something to the lady at the miniature golf place that I later went up and apologized to her for. It wasn't even anything bad, but I was disrespectful to her. I apologized to her, and that was the end of it. I did the right thing, that night. And then, like, we were all going to go out for ice cream after. So we sat in the parking lot while the people finished going through the mini golf place or the mini golf course. And yeah, there was a security guard that walked over from the go-kart place to see why we were hit there. We told him why. We had a conversation. He thought it was funny. Nothing happened. Like, we didn't almost get arrested. We didn't almost go to jail. It was not even close to that. And then when the people finished up, we all went and had ice cream afterwards. But yet, it was this huge scandal in this guy's eyes. And I don't know. To this
Sounds
day,
like it was a huge almost scandal.
I don't know.
You know what I'm saying? Because nothing happened. It was an almost, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They were there, but that cuts to Jehovah's Witnesses being very appearance focused. And even the hint of potential impropriety in any way, especially if you've got a guy who it does sound like had something against you, or he was gunning for you.
Definitely from that point forward, because here is the thing. I didn't kowtow to him. I didn't like throw myself on his mercy. So from that point on, 2 years later, or however many, maybe 3 years later, this guy's house burned to the ground. My dad and the congregation got together. They rebuilt this person's house. Okay, I can't tell you how much time I spent at this person's house. His wife, his daughter. Thank yous, thank yous, thank yous to everybody. And I'm sure I'm internalizing this a lot. And maybe I've never confronted this individual. He never said thank you to me. He said thank you to everybody else. His wife said thank you to me multiple times. Now, maybe I just don't want to acknowledge the thank you, or maybe there was some gratitude there. I probably have it out for him as bad as he has it out for me. I don't know. But all I know is that this next 10 years of my life with him in our congregation, I could not get any traction. And that night when they came over, I mean, I was very emotional. I ended up, maybe 2 nights later, I got to a car accident or a truck accident. I didn't get hurt. The person that was with me didn't get hurt, thankfully. But it was for me, it was the most challenging and worst part of my teenage life, all centered around something that was blown way out of proportion.
It is interesting, though, how one event, or in this case, perhaps non-event, in the life of one of Jehovah's Witnesses can be this thing that follows them. If there's someone around who catches wind of it, or someone, is disfellowship, let's say, and they come back to the congregation. It's almost like they're walking around with the scarlet letter on. People still, like, nobody forgets. Everybody remembers that you were at one point in disfellowship. There's not really, people can't just let it go and move on. There's always some paranoia around it, or a little bit of suspicion. And it sounds like this guy also just had I'm sure that him coming to you with all the authoritarianism of an elder asking you for cooperation and you not cooperating, you know, that was an affront to his authority. And I'm
Oh,
sure that did not go well.
yeah. So then, um, these other brothers in the congregation that I had known all my life, again, they all just started moving away. One ended up like working full time, basically at Patterson, and then going into other congregations. So now I'm just left with this very elder body in our congregation. Nobody really young, and the youngest one on the elder body is this person that I know doesn't care for me, although loves my dad. Like could not be could not love my dad anymore. And so anyway, so then I was just involved with, I mean, anybody's car that needed fixed, me and my best friend at the time. I mean, we were always doing stuff like that. If it was in the congregation, we we're always working around the Kingdom Hall, and again, still doing quick builds, barely, hanging on to those privileges.
Sounds like you were really involved a lot more in the helping people side of things. You like the community, you were helping people with their cars, you were helping rebuild houses that burned down, you were helping to build kingdom halls.
Mhm.
Is that kind of where your focus was? That's what it sounds like, a little bit more than maybe being the button down spiritual progress guy who had to like hit the milestones
Yeah.
on his way to being an elder or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, 100%. And one of my other, friends at the time, he was more of that, even though he was probably, as far as working and money wise, like one of the most materialistic people I've ever met. But he would tick all the right boxes and do enough of the right things where like he was always like progressing and like ministerial servant and then later on an elder, very young, and like no matter what I did, it was like it didn't matter. I was always going to be this John Q publisher and never get over that hump, which is fine in retrospect because I'm glad I didn't that none of that stuff happened. But at the time, I just felt like I couldn't do anything right.
Well, I mean, the whole feeling of never being good enough is, again, the common refrain of the ex-Jehovah's Witness or anyone who leaves any of these high control groups.
Yeah.
And you literally had this one individual who just, it wouldn't have mattered probably what you did.
No, I know. So yeah. So then it's dating my wife. And her parents wanted us to go through the family life book with an older couple in our congregation. Not all of it. I mean, I think we stopped at like the sex portion of the book, if there is a sex portion of the book, but like we didn't go past like having kids or whatever it was. And that was fine. It was fantastic, and they were just the sweetest people in the world. And some of my best memories are going to their house every Sunday night, in separate cars, of course, and and studying and studying a chapter of this family life book. So, and I don't know if it helped our marriage or not, but we're still together. So I'm sure it has more to do with my wife and I being cognizant of each other's needs and wants and all that type of stuff. But those are good memories. And my wife and I still talk about that to this day. But I was encouraged not to date her because she wasn't considered spiritual enough in the congregation. She got baptized um, not long before we got married, maybe a year or so before we got married. And yeah, I was told that she wasn't spiritual enough, and did I really think that was a good idea? And so I mentioned this again. So back to my mom, like I mentioned this to my mom, and she's like, "Well, are they marrying her or are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm the one marrying her." She goes, "Then don't worry about what they have to say." And I was like, "That is awesome." My mom was like, you know, so amazing. I should say that during, just to rewind a minute, she went back to school in her late 40s to get her nursing degree. Um, and she was told, not to by the elders in the congregation, and like, this is a waste of your time and you should be focusing on other things. And she was like, yeah, forget you. This is something I've always wanted to do, and I'm doing it. And so she did that, and she got her nursing degree. And then she always worked third shift and on weekends. So she would work Saturday night, 7 to 7 in the morning on Sundays. So most times she didn't go to the meetings on Sundays, and they were like, "You need to change your job." And she goes, "No, I can. Jehovah understands. He knows what I'm doing. He approves it, and I'm going to be a nurse in the new system. So I'm not worried about it. He's gonna take care of me." And like it just didn't bother her. Like when people would say stuff like that to her, but again, she had lived a lot of life and she wasn't going to be told. She'd been told by men for so long what to do and how to do it that it wasn't happening anymore for her.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've been thinking a lot lately about the term. You would hear it inside the organization, "Make the truth your own," and what they were really meant by that is, take in our doctrine and
Yes.
sound that down into your heart and become the good little JW we want you to be. But there are people who took the truth and made it their own, and
Mhm.
that they put their own spin on it. They kind of made it what they wanted it to be in order to get by. They found the way to, like your mom there with the nursing thing. Jehovah's Witnesses would tell her, "I'm sure we not there won't be a need for nurses in the new system." But she was going to be a nurse in a new system, right? Even though
Yeah.
in the new system we weren't supposed to get sick or hurt or whatever, she had her version of the truth. She made the truth
Yeah.
her own. She made it what she needed it to be in order to get by, and in that environment. And so it's interesting to me how there's kind of these two polar opposite versions of making the truth your own. And it sounds like your mom, by doing what she did, made it more palatable for herself and got to live the life that she wanted to and was true to herself, which is actually a really good thing for her to be able to do.
Yeah. She was always. I'm was very close to both of my parents up until their passing. And yeah, my mom was always like one of my heroes for that reason. One, she didn't take any crap from anybody, but two, you know, she lived a lot of life and had a lot of heartache, unfortunately, in it. But also, she was independent and she did what she thought was the right thing to do. And yeah, she was one of my heroes for sure.
Oh, you emulated some of that, right? The elder started crossing lines with you, and you said, "No, I'm not
Oh,
going to play this game," right?
it
So
gets worse.
that rubbed off on Dino a little bit. It sounds like.
Yeah. So yeah, so we got married in 1989, and the 90s kind of just you know did did the bare well, I guess what would we consider the bare minimum, making the publisher average, still doing quick builds. I had a really close friend of mine that recently, well, moved to South Carolina a few years ago. Um, and I would witness to him all the time. And I was always like, if you can just find one thing wrong with your religion, you got to throw out all of it. That was my line to him all the time. So like we're always talking about the Trinity and heaven and hell, and that was the things I was hung up on with him. Um, so like we talked, him and I talked a lot, and then he was getting married and asked me to be his best man, but he was getting married in a Catholic church. And I mean, I wrestled with this thing. Poor guy. He's like, "Hey, have you decided yet?" And I'm like, I'm wrestling with this decision for months. And I finally said, you know what? I don't know how many times I'm going to be asked to be the best man for somebody at their wedding. And so I did. I was his best man at his wedding. And that caused some issues. There was some shepherding calls after that and whatnot. But I kind of was like, listen, it is what it is. And we had our first daughter in '95, and I remember the same brother that didn't care for me when he found out my wife was, when he found out Dina was pregnant, was like, "Do you really think it's a good idea to bring children into the world at this time?" And I'm like, "You do know she's pregnant, right? It's a little late. Like, what am I supposed to do? The horse is out of the barn." So It is what it is. What are you gonna do? I'm like, what do you want me to like? What kind of question is that?
Well, he really did like you were his little project. He
Oh
did enough
man.
for you. I mean, little snarky comments like that. Wow.
So that went on for yeah, until about well, I can tell you, 2001 was my last quick build, and I know that because I talked to a good friend of mine who is also a faded JW, and I said, "What year did you get married?" And he goes, 2001. And I remember this because I worked on that quick build, and then hopped in a motorhome with him, and we went down to Virginia for his last bachelor weekend. Um, Now he didn't marry a witness, so that was a whole other thing. He asked me to be the best man at his wedding, and again, I don't know how many times I'm going to be asked to be a best man at somebody's wedding, so I agreed to do it. And he's marrying somebody that's not a witness, so you can imagine how that went over in the Kingdom Hall, even though the ceremony was held in a rose garden. And so that was it. That was the last quick build I had ever worked on. There was no way I was. Well, I should say no way. If I had applied myself, I could have gotten back on the quick build crew in a few years. But at that point, I was so busy with my own business going on, raising two daughters now at this point. I'd just been injured in a tubing accident. I ended up with a carabiner hook in the back of my leg by courtesy of my best friend who now doesn't talk to me. So that's one of my shuns, my shunners. Um, but I recovered from that. But and I had been like second lead on the roofing crew at this point. And I think looking back on it, it was like because I had all the tools and equipment more so than anything else. I remember one quick build, we broke for lunch and I went back up on the roof and I'm like, where's my roofing nailer? I know I left it right here. So I went hunting for it. I found it in somebody's bag. I'm like, dude, like this isn't yours. I mean, it has my name on it. Why do you have it in your bag? And he was like, oh, I thought it was mine. Da, 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 da. So like that was another thing I put up on the shelf. I'm like, I don't know about this. Like, what's going on? Um, Come to find out, a few years later, I found out like my roofing overseer had also he disassociated himself. He had enough of whatever it was with him. Um, Good friends of ours that got married around the same time of us, that we used to do a lot of stuff with, got divorced. They had gone to a another congregation where they were pioneers, and the wife ended up hooking up with the presiding overseer of that congregation, and so they ended up getting married. Well, the presiding overseer and the other wife got married. So that was a huge scandal, and my wife and I are like, what's going on with that? Like, how can Jehovah's like well, they're imperfect people. So again, that's another thing you just put up on a shelf and you put in the back. I had been invited out in field service with the circuit overseer right around this time, and I didn't want to go. Oh, Mike, I did not want. So I canceled like last minute Sunday morning. Said I got called out to do something, and there's a comedian, John Mulaney, and he says nothing feels as good as canceling plans when you don't want to do them. It's like an instant high, and I remember that to this day. Like I just can't. Like I, I was, I was just on my way out at this point and didn't know that I was on my way out. 2000. So this goes a little quicker now. So 2002, 2003, I'm on the phone with my friend who now lives up in Maine, who we used to do everything. We're the ones that always worked on cars together. I had helped him move to North Carolina. I helped him move back from North Carolina. I helped him move to Maine. Talked him off the ledge when he was, going through some serious emotional stuff. And he's talking to me one day and tries to ply my two daughters against me as far as like, are you going to be responsible for them dying at Armageddon? And I was like, you know what? We're kind of done. Like, we're not talking about that. Like, don't use my kids against me as leverage. It's like it just really grated against me. And that was the last last time him and I have ever spoken. And I actually went to his house one time in Maine, had a great conversation with his wife. He would not come to the door and talk with me. Now I'm like 5 hours away from my house and wouldn't answer the door. But if he came to my door right now, I would welcome him. I would welcome him in with open arms and be thrilled to see him again. So again, like I was like, man, why would you do that? And I just like none of. And I remember saying to him, is that what Jesus would do? Like, wouldn't he want to help me? And wouldn't he be, a breath of fresh air and take me in and not, like, he wouldn't shut me off. Like, I just didn't, I totally didn't get it, but.
Yeah. And there's no reason for him. Like, why would he shun you? When you went to his house, why would that?
I don't know.
You hadn't done anything.
Our conversation that night on the phone, I basically told him, I was like, look, it kind of is what it is. And I told him this. I'm like, it is what it is. If I can't be counted worthy of making it through Armageddon based upon the type of person that I am, there's nothing more I can do. And he was like, nope, that's not good enough. If you're not doing X, Y, and Z, and he outlined what the steps were. If you're not doing all this, then you're not going to make it. And I have nothing else to say to you. And that's how it ended. So,
wow.
Yeah.
I mean, there was the mini golf incident.
He was there at the mini golf. He was there.
What have you done here that is so terrible? Like, why, you maybe weren't. It shows the judgmental nature of Jehovah's Witnesses.
100%.
That, like, you're not doing anything wrong, but if you're just not doing all the right things that they determine that you need to do, then it's over, and right. It's this way of separating and feeling more righteous than someone else.
Sure. 100%.
That's just terrible.
So we went into pretty much fade mode at that, or inactive mode. I didn't know about fading. I didn't know that was a thing actually at the time. So we went into pretty much inactive mode. And then a few years later, I had a young man, another witness, come to work for me in my construction company. And he had a lot of stuff that happened in his life just in general, but, comes from a strong family. And after about, him and his wife ended up getting divorced. And I mean, that was tough on him. And there was a lot of emotional stuff. He was kind of unreliable at times at work, and he wears his heart in his sleeve. He really does. And he's a good guy. Don't get me wrong. And so he got through that. And then he starts dating a worldly girl. Now, I'm the only one that knows this because I pick up on clues, and it's like, what is that this Fiji bottle of water in your car? Like, you don't drink that. And he just like, dude, and I'm like, look, I'm not saying anything to anybody. I could care less who you're dating. Like, it's not my business. So long story short, he gets this fellowship because he's dating her. And I'm getting pressure on me. Like, you got to fire, like, people are telling me, like, you need to fire him. I'm like, I can't fire him. I'll get in trouble with Department of Labor for firing him for that. And instead, aside from his now wife, he ended up marrying her. But aside from her, I was the only person that he really had in his life. Everyone else was completely cut him off. So, again, he's going to get married. Me and his cousin, who's my friend that was inactive, that had gone to West Virginia with him in 2001. He gets married. We both stand up for him as the best man at his wedding. So the answer is 3 times you're going to be asked to be a best man at somebody's wedding, at least for me. And so he ends up getting reinstated and says, Dino, why don't you come to our congregation? It's a different congregation. It's younger. It's things are cool there, and you'll really enjoy it more. And I'm like, maybe I will. So this is 2005-ish, 2006, somewhere there. So I do. I start going there, and Dean and I go, and the people there our age, kids our age, or kids the same age as ours, and we kind of enjoy it. It's not bad. It's a little bit more of a drive. Since now we've blended our family, we have an apartment for my parents during this time period because they were getting older. So we're doing all the right stuff with that with the family, and we're doing a construction project for somebody in the congregation, and painting was not part of our scope of work. So I get a phone call from a substitute circuit overseer slash presiding overseer of the sister congregation that I'm going to. And he says to me, "Hey, who's doing the painting on this project that you got going on?" And I'm like, I don't know. I think the homeowners are. Well, things would go better for you in the congregation if my company gets to do the painting on that project. I'm like, what? He goes, things will go better for you in the congregation if we get to do the painting project. And I'm like, are you like the mafia or something? Like, what is going on here? And I said, well, you have to take that up with the homeowners. Like, if they want to hire you direct, they can have at it. It has nothing to do with me. But again, that was just like one of these things that came up where I'm like, what the hell was that? And that was pretty much the beginning of Dino fading again, because I just can't deal with this anymore. Like this type of stuff that goes on. And there have been other cases. I'm a nuts and bolts kind of guy. Like I see how people are treated. Doctrine can be twisted and turned, and however you want to interpret the Bible, however you want to interpret the Bible. For me, what's important is how you treat your people. And I remember this one project that we were doing at the same congregation, but at their previous Kingdom Hall. And we're working, and I'm doing something with one of my friends, and these brothers from the other hall, like, they keep taking our tools and they keep unplugging our cords. And I'm like, why are you guys doing this? They just wanted to be, a-holes about what was going on. And it's like, there's no natural love here. Like, if you loved us, you'd be happy we're here working on your Kingdom Hall. Instead, you're trying to make it as difficult as possible for us to work on your Kingdom Hall. And then a presiding overseer slash substitute circuit overseer is like trying to strong arm me into getting a painting project. I'm like, what is this about? So again, I'm like, I'm just not buying this stuff anymore is what I was getting at.
Yeah, because you see that they are not reflective of, they're not who you thought they were. And you start to see
Yeah.
them. And in Jehovah's Witness business dealings get shady, super shady. I've been involved in many stories. I've heard many stories. I've just seen people get completely screwed over by their brothers in the congregation, and nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, I had this. We had a blizzard, whatever it was. We got like 30 inches of snowfall, and this witness called me up. He's like, "Hey, can you do my driveway?" I'm like, "Yeah." Like, I'll get to it when I can. Whatever. It's gonna be like $250. I mean, and he got a huge driveway, and I had to bring my a skid steer over and move the other stuff. So he calls me afterwards. He's like, "Hey, I don't have that kind of money to pay you, but I'm willing to work it. I'll work it off with you." I'm like, "All right, give me a day's worth of labor on this other project." Okay. The time comes for him to pay his portion of it back. He goes, "Hey, my rate is $75 an hour. So after 3 hours, I'll be on the clock with you, blah, 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 blah." And I'm like, "No, that's not the deal. The deal was you'd give me a day of your time. That's what we agreed upon." He goes, "Yeah, but my hourly rate is X, Y, and Z. And so I'm only going to work 3 hours. And after that, you'll have to pay me." I'm like, "Or you can just send me the $250 you owe me, and you don't have to work for me at all. So mail it in when you can." And he did. But it's just like you said, I mean, they're so willing to change the terms of the agreement after the fact.
Yeah,
So,
buddy, if you can go out there and get $75 an hour, then go get you some $75 an hour and send me mine.
So
That's a lot easier than all these other gyrations.
sure. So now during the same time period, my brother, who had never been a witness, decides he needs to get his life like on track. So he becomes a witness in California, ministerial servant. We went out for his first public talk. My mom is over the moon. And then not long after his first public talk, he stops going to meetings. So this is like on a 5-year arc. Like he did one of these and like off the map. So in 2008, I had a chance to go visit him. And I said, why? And he was like, Dino, there is stuff about this organization that's going on that you have no idea. And he didn't want to say what it was. He's just like, just do your research. And my brother is like an extremely smart person. He researches things well. And but he never told me what it was. We've talked about it since. So that was another thing that kind of like clicked. This same time period, I get involved in a local business networking group, and I'm asked to lead this group and be their first chapter president, which I did, and I did very well, and we were very successful. And so all these gifts or all these abilities that I had that aren't being used in the Kingdom Hall are now going into a different direction. And now I'm starting to get all that same fulfillment that we're talking about, that I was looking for in the congregation elsewhere. And I meet like 60 of the most amazing people in my local area and become friends with them. And now I have a new business group. I have a new social dynamic as well. And so at that point, it was very easy not to be involved with what was going on in the Kingdom Hall, because I have other places to use my my talents and my skills and have a social network to fulfill that part of me. At that same time period, I'm going to get involved with a project with Extreme Makeover. And we rebuilt a house in 2008 for a family. And a couple of things happened surrounding that. One, I'm like, all right, let me talk to some people on the quick build crew, because they know how to build stuff quick, and I'll get some ideas from them. Made a phone call to a local brother, and he's like, yeah, that's all proprietary information. I cannot share it with you. Thanks. Have a nice day. I was like, oh, wow. Okay. So that was a big no help. And, but then I got to see a community come together and do something for a family. There was no Jehovah's Spirit there, right? So it was pretty amazing. And
but they were all just doing it for their own glory and for riches, right?
Yeah, no. I cried more tears, and we saw more tears shed on that project than any quick build I've ever been on. And yeah, no, there was no riches involved. Trust me. It was the most horrific weather you could imagine. And it just got done. And these people, you'd put a call out on the radio, we needed more help. And then hundreds of people would show up just to get this project done for this family that had lost their father and their brother in a drowning accident and were homeless. And to see that. And then a year later to repeat it with another family right down the street, that the father had become a quadriplegic, and then their house burned. And the community came back together without a TV show this time. So now there's no lights, cameras, and action. It's just the community doing the right thing for the right reasons. And you're like, wait a minute. So now I have this burning desire in me, like, there's only one way to feed that animal, and that's to keep doing things like that. So, which was good and bad, because then I became kind of obsessive with looking for ways to help out in the community. And I probably, like, the pendulum probably swung really far one way for a while. I had a opportunity to go to Joplin, Missouri to work with the TV show and rebuild houses out there for people. It's my Joplin shirt I have on. And I got to see people of all faiths, colors, creeds, people of no faith come together out there and just doing the right things for the right reasons. And I stopped at, oh, go ahead.
I would say, for those who don't know, why Joplin, Missouri?
Why Joplin, Missouri?
'Cause not everybody's going to
2011,
know that.
I think it was May 22nd, EF5 tornado came through and ripped a hole down the center of Joplin, a mile wide and 13 miles long, and pretty much leveled everything in its way. There were over 8,000 people or 8,000 homes that were at least damaged. A whole hospital was destroyed. Largest loss of life in a tornado for a long time, since like the mid 50s. I think over 160 people died as a result of that tornado. So Extreme Makeover decided that they were going to go to town or come into town, and they did 7 houses in 7 days, rebuilt a park there as well, Cunningham Park. And one of the greatest experiences of my life. I have people to this day that are best friends, talk to them all the time, shoot text messages, just great people, and saw Methodist, Lutheran, Catholic charities all involved in what was going on there, Jewish charities, every denomination of faith possible was there, except Jehovah's Witnesses. And I went to the local Kingdom Hall, and they were doing a cleanup on the Kingdom Hall. And I said, hey, I'm a witness, not really active, but, I'm from Connecticut. What are you guys doing? How are you involved in what's going on here? And they're like, what? They're not involved. I'm like, God, it must be like Watchtower Bible Tract Center. They must have sent something here, some money, something to help, like crews, help rebuild houses, this and that. No, we fixed our Kingdom Hall. A couple local congregations got together and helped us out. Okay. Well, what else you got going on? Nothing. Meanwhile, I met this guy, Ben, who moved from Georgia to there, hooked up with these charities, and is rebuilding houses for people basically out of his pocket, because he just wants to do the right thing for the right reasons. And I went back in 2012 with my daughter, Gabrielle, and a really good friend of mine, Peter, who I mentioned earlier about his son passing away. And again, just hooked up with Ben, and we worked on houses. I don't know the people there, but we helped these people, be able to move back into their house and have some sense of normalcy in it. And Ben's not getting anything out of this. He's putting all this out of his pocket and whatever donations he can scrape together to make this happen. And I'm like, there's some damn good people out here that have nothing to do with Jehovah's Spirit, have nothing to do with witnesses being involved. This is amazing. This is like really, really neat. And so that again was a life-changing experience for me and for my daughter. She got to see some really cool stuff while we were out there. Plus, we got to bond as father and daughter too at the same time.
Yeah, that would have to be an amazing experience to get to have together. That's awesome that you all were able to do that, and that so many other people were able to do so as well.
So much, yeah. So meanwhile, back home, my dad is still attending meetings, and I'm driving him to the meetings, and sometimes he needs a ride back home. So I'm sitting with him during these meetings, kind of dressed in casual clothes, because like I'm not getting dressed up for this stuff. But I would sit next to him at the Kingdom Hall and listen to what was being said, and I'm just like, holy crow, like I do not, none of this resonates with me anymore. Like all the stuff that like I used to really hold on to tight, and the ideology and the us versus them, just and now it's like nails on the chalkboard. So I did that for about a year, and finally somebody came up to me. Well, it wasn't at a meeting. I think they might have been visiting my mom and dad here at the house, and said, listen, Dino, if it's easier for you, we'll be more than happy to pick dad up for the meetings and drop him back off afterwards. And I'm like, that would be amazing. Because it was really only on Sunday meetings that dad would go. It was too tiring for him on other times. So that was a relief.
Yeah,
Sit through that anymore.
Let's give them props. They showed up. That doesn't happen often. So for them to be able to step up to try to help him, that's a kind thing.
Yeah, my dad, and again, my dad was so loved in the congregation. So in 2015, I got a job with Habitat for Humanity in our area, and I was their director of construction for almost 3 years. And again, I met the most amazing people through that experience. Again, people of all different faiths that would come together. And I remember, and this is one thing that I will always appreciate about how I was raised. I can talk Bible. I mean, I might not remember the exact chapter and verse of scriptures, but I can talk Bible. I can talk basic tenets and ideology of the arc of the Bible with people. So their pastor came and like we're having these great conversations, and he's like, "Man, you must have a background. Like, how did you grow up?" And I would tell him, and he was like, "Wow, I've never had this type of conversation before with a Jehovah's Witness." And I'm like, "Well, not really one anymore, but yes." So I do appreciate the knowledge that I do have of the Bible and its basic story arc of it, and I can have conversations with people about that. Met great young people, hundreds of college kids that just want to do the right thing. Like they're just there to help. They have no other agenda. And it's pretty amazing to meet 20-year-olds that have like this desire to make significant change in the world and in the communities. One day somebody shows up on the job site and they're my only two volunteers for the day. And it's somebody I recognize from back in the day as a witness. And she's really hesitant at first about opening up with me. But then we had the most amazing day working together, catching up with each other, talking about family, talking about the reasons why we're no longer really involved with the witnesses anymore. Life experiences that she went through, life experiences that I went through, compare and contrast, that type of thing. And it was really nice to reconnect with her. She's just, she was a sweetheart of a person and so much fun to reconnect with. My dad had actually walked her down the aisle at her wedding because something happened at the last minute with her dad, and he wasn't there. He showed up a little bit later. I don't know what the back story of that is, but my dad passed away not long after that, and she showed up to his memorial service, and then her dad passed away not long after that. And we saw each other again at his memorial service. So then my dad was able to reconnect back with his family in the last few years of his life pretty well. So that was really nice. He got to meet, spend a lot more time with his brothers that were still here and his sisters until they passed away. And then my dad got sick and passed away at the end of October of 2016. So then here's the pros and cons of faded versus just being out and being fully shunned. When you're faded, and you still live in the area that you grew up with, you're all the time. I run into people at home, always at Home Depot. I don't know why. Plug a shout out to Home Depot, I guess, for the witnesses getting together there all the time. But I see them all the time. And if I was fully shunned, they wouldn't talk to me. And unfortunately, they still want to talk. And they always come back and, what's new? And so it's always this awkward, called this awkward tap dance without saying too much, but at the same time saying enough and having a conversation. So when my dad passed away, again, there's this awkward tap dance about how we're going to handle this going forward. My dad wanted this particular brother to give his memorial talk, and he had verbalized it like open, like, I want this guy to do it. And people heard it. And so I said to this same brother that 20 years later, still 30 years later, still doesn't care for me. He's like, no, that's not happening, because that brother that he wants to do the talk is no longer an elder, because apparently he has a heart and took his son back in to live with him after he had gotten gotten a girl pregnant, and wanted to help raise the grandson and help keep him, from going down a bad road. And apparently that is a horrible thing to do. And he let his daughter go to college, and apparently that is also a horrible thing to do. And you can't be I guess you can't be an elder if you do those.
No,
things.
You can't be an elder. No.
So, so this is a very awkward conversation that we're having. And I said, listen, I believe it is like there's a workaround on everything. So I said, if I move the memorial service out of the Kingdom Hall and into a public space, I can have whoever I want speak, right? And I knew the answer to it, and they were kind of like, yeah, you could. I'm like, all right, then that's what we'll do. We're just going to move it to the firehouse where the reception is, and we'll just have a memorial service there. And I'll have this brother give the memorial talk, and I'll be able to grant my dad his dying wish. A man who's done more for this Kingdom Hall and more for this congregation than anybody else, aside maybe from the person that donated the land. But my dad rebuilt that Kingdom Hall twice. He did all the maintenance on that Kingdom Hall. He paid for most of it probably out of his pocket. And this is how you're going to like basically treat his dying wish. This is a man who doesn't know it yet, but in 2014, when you changed the rules and now you took ownership of all these Kingdom Halls, which was another red flag for me. That was one that and when it happened, I told my dad, I'm like, Dad, I hope you don't live long enough to see them sell the Kingdom Hall. He's like, they're never selling this Kingdom Hall. It'll never happen. Blah, blah, blah. 2 years later, he's like, yeah, we're being condensed into the other congregation. That's 25 minutes away. I'm like, I told you, Dad. I told you what was going to happen. That to me, that's when I knew the wheels had completely come off the cart. One of the things I always told people, I'm like, the one thing that's unique about the Witnesses is every congregation owns their own hall. It's unique. It's not owned by the overall like hierarchy. So anyway, they changed that. So now they owned it and then sold it. My dad's memorial service was one of the last uses of that hall.
So you did have it at the Kingdom Hall then?
Had it at the Kingdom Hall because I held firm, and they caved, I guess. I said, this brother that's going to give the talk, do you think he's going to do a bad job? And they're like, no. Do you think he's going to say anything that's going to offend anybody or not stick to the script? And they said no. I'm like, so what's the problem? They came back to me like an hour later. Yeah, he can do the talk. I was like, okay, great. I'm glad you guys can have had a little bit of humanity left in you. So, and there were over 300 people at that memorial service. Like I said, my dad was loved, and it was great. I got to meet. Hadn't seen a lot of people in a long time that came from all the quick build program. But what was unique about that experience was we had about 250-ish witnesses, but there was a huge number of people from my life outside of the witnesses that were also there. And for me to look at that crowd and see like this blending of two different groups, one that I used to be a part of and one that I was more a part of now, was really, really awesome to see. And they did as much to encourage me as anybody else that was in that room that day. So that was awesome. It was tough, to say goodbye to my dad, but at the same time, it was a good way for it to happen.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way to get closure.
Yeah, and we had gone through at Habitat a really horrific experience as well, with a fire at a house that we had built, and their daughter had passed away in that fire. She was like 6 or 7 years old, and that was a tough thing to experience as well. And both of those memorial services were on the same day. It was that little girl in the morning, and then my dad in the afternoon. So that was a very emotional day, obviously for me. And those people were exactly what I needed that day to help me get through it. So that was good. But that opens up a time of vulnerability. So one of my friends, somebody, I don't know if I've ever even mentioned this to you. So he called me and he's like, hey, there's this brochure, Return to Jehovah. Why don't you and I sit down and why don't we go through this? So I'm like, okay, like, maybe I should. And I sat through about 10 minutes of this, and I was like, oh my God, like I can't, like this is just so horrific. Like I just can't. It just grated against my personality so badly. And I felt bad to tell him when we were done. Like he's like, all right, let's close with a prayer. And I was like, how about we don't? Like, can we just leave this as is? let's just walk away. I need some time. And I think I probably played it off with him like it's still too fresh, too emotional with my dad and everything. But I just couldn't, Mike. I mean, it was like I can't go back into that world. I am so far removed from it. It was tough.
Yeah,
It was a
that
tough
would be
thing.
tough to be in that vulnerable place and then have them trying to come in. And of course, the Return to Jehovah brochure is just them inserting their narrative as to why people leave. It's not,
Yeah, yeah,
it's
and
not
I had a conversation not that long ago with somebody, and he was like, "Now this person, he was disfellowshipped while he was in the hospital recovering from a heart attack." So I'm having a conversation with him about this, and he was like, "Well, you're in a better place than me. You're only faded or inactive." He's like, "You're not disfellowship. If the end comes tomorrow, I'm dead." And I'm like, "Dude, like, why are you like? Why is that even like a part of your processing of life? Like, you shouldn't have this baggage hanging over you." But he's like, "Did somebody do something to you? Like it was," and that was like that's their narrative. Like somebody did something to me, and that's what caused me to leave Jehovah. Not you're part of a cult, dude. Like what's going on here is horrendous. You
right.
know,
That's what the brochure Return to Jehovah isn't to help people come back. It's to help people who are in not think about why people really leave. It's to snow them, to give them, well, people really just leave because their feelings were hurt, or something like that, so that the narrative inside the cult is that people just leave because of hurt feelings or personal imperfection, not because they did any research or saw how messed up we are.
right?
No, that's that they don't want you to think that that's the case, so they give you a false narrative. It's
Sure.
brilliant gaslighting, but it's terrible truth telling.
Yes. Yes.
So
Um. So I my time at Habitat comes to an end in 2018, and I went to work for a high-end builder along the shoreline for about a year or so, and then I came back to my business working in it full time. And so in 2019, I just start binge listening to anything I can get my hands on when it comes to witnesses, ex-witnesses, what's really going on behind the scenes. Again, I'm very much a nuts and bolts kind of guy, and I found this little podcast called My JW Life. I I binge listened to that and then caught up on all the subsequent shunned, and it was like, wow, I'm not alone. There's so many other people that have been through this, and one of the things I really appreciate about your podcast or shunned is looking at other high control groups and other organizations that use the same tactics, the same playbook, and so many people that have had the same similar life type experiences, but in a different religion or in a different high control group. And I'm like, wow, I'm not, definitely not alone. And so that kind of, you know, brings us up to where I am now. And just, I wanted my kids, my wife and I talked about, I don't think, honestly, I don't think my wife ever bought into any of this belief structure. Like she just wanted to have like a kind of a normal life. We lost my mom last year. We lost her mom the year before, but we used to do so much with my in-laws, and we kind of like all faded together. There was no shunning in the family. I've never asked them why they stopped going. It is what it is, and so I'm fortunate that I was able to leave with my wife, and I have a great family unit. I've learned so much from my daughters. I just wanted them to grow up and just be themselves, not have all this added weight and baggage put upon them that they would have to conform to. They could just be who they are and who they were always meant to be. I mean, we're all products of our life experiences. I understand that, but So it's great to see them just be themselves and find their way through life. And we talk so much about different aspects of life and some religion and some politics and and what gaslighting is and just in general different things I've learned and how it's affected me, but how they've had a chance not to let it affect them. And anyway, sorry, I'm rambling now.
No, that's all beautiful. I can only imagine that, having kids is this opportunity to, I don't know, it's kind of a do-over in some ways. It's a way to learn and grow through the eyes of your
Mhm.
children as they are experiencing this thing called life for the first time. That's got to be, it helps you probably to think of things with fresh perspective or to challenge things that you were taught or believed at one point. Um, I think that's all fantastic. Um, I also have to say, because I noticed you said this earlier, it's a little bit of an aside, but people do this a lot, and they call my first podcast was called "This JW Life,"
Okay, thank you.
and you said "My JW Life," and I'm not saying that to correct you. What I'm saying is that I love you're not. A lot of people say that to me. They call it "My
Because
JW
we
Life." And I love that because I think that means that people are internalizing that and connecting to it and seeing themselves in it. And I think that that's what I like about all of this is that you are seeing yourself through whether it was my story in this JW life, whether it's these stories on Shunned, even if they're not ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, or just even this life with your kids, that with your children and your wife, you're getting this, they give you perspective on your own life as well.
They do.
If you're a self-reflective person, which you obviously are, and it's just beautiful to see all those things kind of culminate. So, what's that mean for you? What has that given you, or what do you have any plans for the future? What do you love about what you get to do today?
So I'm involved in a lot of different things, especially community wise. COVID kind of was able tamp that down a little bit because we just weren't able to do as much in the community. But I got involved with a project here called Buddy Benches back, I think probably 7-8 years ago. And what a buddy bench is it's just a very simple bench that's put into a school or a public setting, and they're painted very vibrant colors, very positive themes, and it's where somebody can just go and sit and either reflect or someone else can come over and it's a signal that hey, I'm looking for a friend or I want a buddy, and it's an anti-bullying technique to bring people together. And there's been well over 300 of them built for our local community, and I've had a hand in probably building 200 of those 300. Um, and the woman, when she calls me, she's like, Dino, I need more benches. And I told her, whenever you need them, you call me and I will build them for you. So it's been about a year since we've had to build any. Um, but I look forward to doing that. When the pandemic hit, again, I'm a fixer. I want to get in there and help. And there's nothing. How am I going to help with COVID? Well, the red heart thing started becoming a big deal, and I told my daughter, I'm like, hey, Gab, I want to draw a heart for me so I can cut it out in a piece of wood. I want to put it on our mailbox post. Well, fast forward to 300 hearts later, and over $1,800 donated to us for making these hearts. People in the community again coming together, sheets of plywood just showing up on my front door, just out of the blue. I don't know who sent them, but here's another sheet of plywood so you can cut more hearts out of. And then we took that money and donated it to a local food prep person who then made ready to eat meals for frontline medical care workers. Guess what? We were able to figure out a way accidentally to make a difference, to be able to help people. And that felt so good. Because again, my mom was a nurse. in healthcare. My wife and my daughter both work in healthcare settings, and to know, all right, we're able to do something to make a difference in these people's lives more than. I just watched a news thing today where people were going door to door signing people up for vaccines, and I'm like, now there's a door to door program I can get behind. Something that's going to make a difference now, not some future far off fairy tale. So, um, for, so me, it's just, I've reduced my business where it's just me and one other person. Really, it's family time. We do a lot of stuff together as a family. We're recording our weekly family trivia nights. I'm hoping that it will be a YouTube channel someday. Of course, I need someone to edit it, and my daughter hasn't. She's so busy with school right now. But anyway, that's the goal. But if nothing else, we do trivia night, and we entertain ourselves on it. So if nothing else, we're self-entertaining, and just again, spending time with my family and friends, and being able to now I take more of a pointed look at where I can make my opportunities to make a difference in the community. It's not as grand of a scale anymore. I miss my time at Habitat, but it is what it is. I miss rebuilding people's houses for them, but that's a lot of work. And those energies, and my family has sacrificed for that, for time away. So I want to make up for that on the now and be there for them however I can be, and just enjoy time with them.
That's beautiful. Clearly, you're a guy that, I mean, I think your sincerity comes across, and you are just trying to help people and do nice things. I'm sure that you giving not back, but you giving to others gives back to you in ways.
Yeah.
Clearly you've taken the community and the purpose aspect of something that you once had, and you've made it your own. You've taken that and created something out of that in different ways, or joined other people that are already doing those things, and use that for good. And I think that's amazing. And it sounds like you've been able to honor your parents, throughout these years. Maybe they had a little bit of different life than you, but you can see traits of theirs that you've carried forward. And what more can you ask for other than that, and to be happy?
I was told multiple times by people that are still witnesses, in and around both my mom and my dad, how impressed they were with the level of care in giving. Especially my wife is amazing with that. I mean, it's not her parents; they're my parents, but you would never have known it. She treated them like they were her own. And so I think we got a lot of kudos, and we got a lot of passes, if you will, granted to us because we were such good people. I think towards my parents, they appreciated that anyway.
No, I think that's beautiful too, that you were able to do that for your parents and give them. This all could have gone in another really ugly way. And it sounds like you all made the best out of the situation, and you helped your parents to be who they were, and honored that in its own way. And they had allowed you all to be who you were as well. And I mean, I don't know. Shouldn't that just be how life is? We just let people be who they are and not expect to fit them into our molds. I mean,
there should not be all these conditions put upon it. That's for sure.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
All right, Matt. Any words of wisdom or advice that you'd like to leave anybody with? Anything we didn't get to?
I do. In I think 2014, I met a man and his wife through a friend of mine, and they were, long story, they adopted their niece and nephew out of foster care, and they needed a place for them to live. And so I just took it upon myself when I met them. I'm like, we're just going to make this happen for you. Like, we're going your sacrifice. His kids are almost grown, and so he's pressing reset on the 5-year-olds. And I'm going to read this for 3 reasons. There's great people outside of Watchtower or whatever group that you may be in. So many of these groups say you're only the people outside of here are evil and they're out to get you. No, they're not. There's tons of great people out there. I was able to do more. And literally I've helped and met thousands of people outside of Watchtower. And I was able to do more to help them than any time that I spent inside Watchtower. And 3, Watchtower has a way of driving away really good people. And not to be self-serving, but I think I'm a pretty good person. And when you read things like this, it's very humbling to have people write stuff like this about you. But my friend Tony wrote this. He says, this is a letter about an extraordinary humanitarian, someone whose authentic drive to help those in need is nothing short of incredibly inspiring. If someone of his caliber is destined to cross your path in your lifetime, you're extremely fortunate and a better person for having known them. He goes, I remember calling Dino because it still doesn't feel right to receive generosity of this magnitude when there are families that need it so much more. And my reply to him at that time was, Tony, you just don't understand. Someday later in life, I want to be known for and remembered as someone who made a difference. He then says, Dino is truly inspirational with his goals and making a difference and completing challenges. And anyone who hears his stories will want to do the same. And then he finishes up with us becoming friends. But this is something I said to him. And it's true with anybody that crosses my path. It's like our friendship with our families are much more valuable than any amount of money could ever be. And that's how I feel about people in my community, people I've been able to help, and people in the future I might be able to help. And, and it's possible in alternate universes, I might have been able to pursue other interests. I don't know. However, this is the universe that I know. This is the world that I'm living in. And as you always say, I try to make the best of it. I enjoy the experiences in the life as we know. I'm not living for some future fantasy. These organizations, these groups have already took so much of our earlier lives that I just want to enjoy our family in the here and now. And don't worry about what could have been, what should have been. It's letting go of the hope that things could have been different, right, Mike? Mm-hmm. And know that I'm going to make the best of what I have in front of me.
I think that's the perfect way to end it. I appreciate you telling your story. And it's not just your story. You shared about your parents some and other people in your life and Joplin. There are people now who might know about Joplin who may not have known about. This your story encompasses many other stories, and I appreciate you sharing it.
I like telling stories in case you haven't noticed. Stories are fun. And thank you for everything you do, Mike. It does makes a world of difference.
I'm happy to help. Happy to be the platform for people's stories.